Financial advisors know the business owner segment is one of the most valuable client groups in our industry. They're also the most underserved. Most business owners have never had a true valuation. They don't understand their company's goal value, and they aren't getting advice that aligns with their business or personal financial plan. Today, we're going to break down how advisors can win, retain, and serve business owners by delivering the client conversations that business owners actually value.
You're listening to the Resilient Advisor podcast. This episode of the Resilient Advisor is brought to you by the Titleist Advisor Network, where independent financial advisors become resilient, high-growth business owners. Since 2003, we've been private equity-free, helping advisors build real equity in their firms. Learn more at jointitleist.com.
Welcome to the Resilient Advisor podcast, where we bring industry experts to help you build your business your way. My name is Jay Coulter, and joining me today is Jason Early, the CEO of RISR. If you're catching this recording live on LinkedIn, YouTube, or X, and you want to ask Jason a question about the business owner market while we're recording, please just go on down into the comment section, leave a note, and I'll be able to pose it to Jason. Jason, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, man. Great to be here.
All right. Advisors love the idea of attacking the business owner marketplace, but it's incredibly hard to do. We're going to spend time unpacking it. You were on Brad Johnson's podcast recently, Do Business, Do Life. It was an interview that was recorded at Future Proof earlier this year. You guys did a great job of getting into this market. I encourage advisors to go listen to that show as well. I'm going to try to not be very duplicative with that because Jason did a really good job unpacking it. So let's start with questions that I get from advisors when we're working with them. So business owners aren't necessarily a niche because they're everywhere. That's something I heard you mention to Brad. What do advisors miss when they think about the size of the opportunity when attacking business owners?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think, and we are guilty of this ourselves for sure. I mean, a lot of, people in and around the financial services ecosystem tend to throw out these huge numbers that talk about size of markets. And it can kind of, go right over the head of the advisors they're trying to communicate to. But so, if I'm doing that, I would say something like the effect of $14 trillion of business value is going to transition over the next 5 or 10 years. But the reality is, I think when you just walk up and down Main Street in your own town, in your own city, in your own state, you get a real good feel for what powers the economy, and it's business owners, right? It's privately held companies. It's not the Mag 7. It's not, right? So it's the private companies that fuel our towns, that fuel our cities, that ultimately fuel the country. That's the opportunity that advisors have because, forget the size in terms of the sheer amount of wealth that's locked up in private companies and the amount that's going to transact or transition. Just think about the amount of clients or the amount of people that own businesses. And the reality is those are the wealthiest people. And so when you start to break it down and you start to think about who fits your ideal client profile, if you're being honest with yourself, more times than not, it's going to be business owners.
Yeah. Jason, in working with financial advisors and trying to map out markets to go after, it seems to me there are two big ones that everybody should consider attacking if they're going to niche down. Either the pre-retirees and retiree marketplace or the business owners. I usually get very little pushback on that when I work with advisors, but really seeing past the initial startup phase of going and trying to attack the marketplace, that's what I really want to lean into in this show for advisors, the how to do it. But let's begin with the end in mind. If they were to lean into business owners for the next 5 years, how different could their practice look?
Yeah. Also, again, this is so practice by practice, but I think it's another great question. I would say, if advisors, and if they're working with you, very certainly they are. But I think if they were taking their practice seriously and they're looking at average revenue by client, or they're doing a real assessment of their business and trying to understand, who are their best clients. I mean, the best advisors have a great understanding of who their ideal client is. And if they were going through an exercise where they're, top grading their business or trying to, make their bottom client look a whole lot more like their top client, business owners are incredible in this regard. So when you think about not only the opportunity, all of financial services is surrounding the business owner today, because as they transition and transact, there's an incredible amount of wealth unlocked. But what most advisors miss is business owners actually make great clients while they operate as well. So not only is there wealth to be managed, there is risk to be managed, there is financial planning to be done, be it cash flow, be it personal financial planning. So there's just so many revenue opportunities, sitting within a business owner, that it makes it an incredible client while the owner operates, and it allows the advisor to drive up their average, revenue per client.
Let's go a little bit deeper on that, because that's really where the rubber meets the road with most advisors. When they think about attacking the space, they'll say, well, all their money's locked up in their business. There are other opportunities there. You really just addressed them. But if you were talking to an advisor for the first time and explaining the opportunity to work with business owners beyond managing AUM, how should they attack it? How have you seen the successful ones unpack this?
Yeah, two things there, right? And you're so right. Forever, advisors have given the Heisman to the business owner, saying exactly that. And that's true until it's not, meaning as they transition and transact and all of that wealth is unlocked, every wealth manager on the planet wants to be there to manage those assets. But what everyone's realizing is I better be there now providing advice. So that's number one. And number two, it's true on a percentage basis, meaning if I, own a manufacturing business and the business is worth 50 million bucks and my overall net worth is 55 million bucks, that saying is certainly true. Most of my wealth is tied up in the business. But I still have 5 million bucks outside of the business. And so what I'm trying to communicate here is that, like, I think it's 60 some odd percent of millionaires own businesses, and roughly 90% of those worth $30 million and up are business owners. And so the sheer amount of, wealth locked in the business is high, but there's a lot of wealth outside of the business as well. And so that being said, that wasn't exactly your question. Your question was, how would you make them a great client while they operate as well? And I think there's no shortage of opportunity here. So certainly when you look at the landscape of who owns businesses and the demographics, the age, most business owners are baby boomers. Most, even the ones that not, say that they plan to exit their business in the next 5 to 10 years. And so there's just a tremendous amount of planning to be done leading up to that mass transition of these businesses, making it just an incredible opportunity for advisors surrounding that space.
So most business owners are baby boomers. I mean, intuitively, that makes a lot of sense, but that has to create just a massive opportunity here. How are you finding the financial advisors that choose to niche down into this space and are aggressively marketing? How are they going after that boomer marketplace?
I think that the best advisors, right? It's all about marketing and communication. You said it. So it's not, hey, I'm Jay Coulter, I'm an advisor and I work with business owners. It's, hey, I'm Jay Coulter and I work with auto dealers in the tri-state area that are transitioning in the next 5 years, right? They are dialed in on their messaging, and this is where I get it. Like, when we push back on business owners aren't niche, it's mostly because we believe that serving a niche inside of the segment makes a lot of sense, right? So the more dialed in you are on who is your ideal client profile, the more you will attract, right? And that can be counterintuitive because most people want to stay broad and say, well, I don't want to carve out any parts of the market, and they're missing the boat. So it's the ones that get really dialed in on a specific niche inside of a segment are those that we see that have the most success. And so it's the advisors that are aggressively marketing, and they're inserting themselves into that ecosystem. So if I am Jay Coulter and I serve auto dealers in the tri-state area, what am I doing? Well, I'm getting involved in their association. I'm going to their meetings. I'm working with the CPAs and the attorneys that are in and around this ecosystem. And so I start to become known as the advisor that works with auto dealers in the tri-state area. And then I get to really understand their businesses. So all businesses are not the same. Certainly, all industries are not the same. And so the deeper the understanding for their business and the pains that they feel, the better an advisor I am. And so we think that going really deep in a particular niche makes an awful lot of sense.
Yeah, a ridiculous amount of sense. You could start podcasts that are directed directly to that market and advertising in their industry journals. just like you're taught to attack any niche. I don't know why I've never put two and two together. Why wouldn't you niche down inside of the small business owner marketplace? You've mentioned auto dealers, I think was the example you just gave. What are some of the other successful niches you've seen advisors go after inside of the small business community?
We've seen it. Look, medical, right? So be it medical or dental, certainly we see a lot of advisors that serve the medical and dental profession. We see a lot of very successful advisors that are serving manufacturing and even inside of manufacturing, be it food manufacturing or what have you. Look, there's probably great examples of darn near every industry where there's an advisor that is serving that industry incredibly well. Certainly in the Midwest, we've got a lot of advisors that serve. This goes back to the conversation with Brad, but serves farms, right? And so that's a little bit, dependent on where you are in the country and who you are as an advisor. But we've seen a lot of success across many industries, but certainly a lot in the medical and dental space. Certainly a lot in the manufacturing space.
Yeah, both of those make a ton of sense. If you had to start a financial advisory practice today and go after the business owner marketplace based on all you know and frankly all the data you've seen, what would you go after?
What a great question. I'm not sure. So I don't have a super thoughtful answer. I'll go off the cuff here. I haven't thought about this. We have seen a lot of data. I think that the manufacturing one's probably interesting. I think that if you look at the data, there is an incredible amount of manufacturing firms, and so we see a lot of data in two forms. We see a lot of transaction data, and then we also see a lot of data that gets run through our platform. And so I think from an advisor's perspective, manufacturing businesses tend to be larger, and like anything, the larger the business, the more the opportunity, the more the complexity is there, the more the problems that you can solve. And so I think manufacturing businesses in general offer a lot of opportunities for advisors to help, and they tend to be larger. So I think it just if you're looking to drive the average revenue per client, that's probably a pretty good place to start.
So manufacturing, niche down, and then really make sure you go to after the baby boomers in that segment. That sounds like a pretty good place to start.
It's a great place to start.
Man. Now we'll talk about how you can help advisors identify these opportunities. But before we get there, let's talk about actually starting the engagement with them. So you start prospecting the manufacturing marketplace, you get a meeting, you get that first 60-minute meeting with the business owner. What should that meeting look like? What should they focus on? Because it can't be the same as meeting with the pre-retiree.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about this. I think, look, the best advisors ask the best questions. And so we're in the software business. We are not in the financial advice business. I am in no position to be telling advisors how to run great meetings, but specific to the business, it is our view that you have got to get a deep understanding of not only that business, but around their goals, hopes, dreams around that asset. Because for far too long, advisors have been either put in a position or on their own volition, they treat the business like every other asset on the balance sheet for the owner. And we think that's nuts, right? When you think about this asset for the owner, they've got their blood, their sweat, their tears into this asset, and they have a far deeper emotional tie to this asset than they do their holding in Google. So all that said to say that the best advisors ask the best questions. I think that first 60-minute meeting ought to be all about discovery, and the best advisors are pulling out the goals, hopes, and dreams. And it should be specific to that asset. Again, business owners have no problem talking about their business. So if you have the right questions, you'll have the keys to a powerful meeting.
Okay. And so when I think about someone attacking the retirement marketplace, I can set up a very simple 2 or 3 meeting process that really helps uncover those goals, go deep in just the planning aspect of it and deliver a plan. How is it different if you're attacking the business owner community?
I don't think it's all that different. I think that, what's important is having a deep understanding to your point on the pre-retirees, like that you've got to understand certainly you've got to understand their current financial position. You got to understand where they want to go, and then you got to understand, how you're going to help them get there. I think that as it relates to business owners, it's not all that different. You just have to better understand that asset, right? My point earlier that advisors tend to treat the business like every other asset on their balance sheet. That looks something like this. Okay, Jay, you and I are sitting down, and you own a manufacturing business like we've been talking about. And the old way might sound something like this. All right, Jay, what's in the 401k? What's in your brokerage account? What's your house worth? What are your retirement goals? What's your business worth? And we plug all that into the plan, and then we come back and deliver a plan to you based on that. That's nuts. When you think about treating a business owner and giving the business the same, level of attention as every other asset on their balance sheet. So it doesn't have to look all that different, but you've got to better understand that asset. So certainly you've got to understand it from a financial perspective. And we could talk about that, but then you also have to understand, what do they want to accomplish with the business, or what do they want this to look like? Because every owner exits their business someday, some way. And so do you want to sell to private equity and get the headlines that everyone's after? Do you want to transition it to the next generation? Do you want to transition it to employees? Asking those questions matters if you're giving advice to the owner. And so, it might look very similar, but you might just need some more tools, to serve the business owner than you otherwise might be thinking about.
Absolutely. And let's get into your tool. First, we have our first question from Dave Smitterbush. He says, great information is a natural next step for the financial advisor to go after the business owner's employee retirement plan, or do you have any recommendations for doing so?
I love the question, Dave. I think, look, we talk a lot about speed to trust. So when working with business owners, speed to trust is huge, right? And business owners are notoriously difficult to pin down. So if you can build that relationship, you can build that trust with the owner. The retirement plan should be a fairly easy thing to pick off. Again, we talked about the complexity that business owners have. So not only do they have all of the things related to the business, this is a great example of one that they're thinking about that's on their plate that they have to deal with. They've also got all the personal stuff, financial planning related. So as you get in there, as you build the relationship, as you build trust, as you take them through the process, this should be a fairly straightforward thing to pick off and help to build the relationship with.
Excellent. Thank you for the question, Dave. All right. This is all been kind of a setup building up to talking about the marketplace, what it means for advisors, talking about some of the challenges advisors have, even breaking into the marketplace. But you have a great tool at RISR to help advisors have a deeper conversation. Let's walk through the value proposition of RISR in depth and how advisors could use it. And I want to give you a blank slate for this, Jason. How do advisors use RISR to help attack the business owner market?
Good man. So I think, again, we've talked a little bit about this, but it's really better understanding the asset. So again, if you were an advisor and you are like many today that are surrounding the business owner or thinking about a strategy for how do I serve business owners, you probably lack the tools and technology to do so. So, we think about 25, 30 years ago when, the advent of financial planning software. And so advisors for a long, long time have had access to tools and technology to serve the individual or the family or the household, but they've been flying blind as it relates to the business. And so our software is you can think of it as financial planning software, but for business owners. And so you can really think of it in three areas, which is data capture, relevant insights, and client ready deliverables. And so from a data capture perspective, business owners have data that's messy and it's all over the place. It's disparate. It's disorganized. And so one of the worst parts of the job for the advisor is gathering and analyzing data. And so we've made that super simple and streamlined and frictionless. And so whether it's a deep hook into QuickBooks, whether it's uploading tax returns into our AI tax doc reader, we're pulling all of that financial data in super seamlessly and frictionlessly. And then, relevant insights. So we're going to be, serving up insights in key areas: business valuation, wealth, risk, and succession and exit planning. all things that advisors want to be talking about with business owners. So they're confident and competent in talking about these things, and the software leads you down the path of having those conversations. And then ultimately the client ready deliverables. So you're able to deliver, be it one page reports or a total report across all those areas to help the business owner understand the value of their business, help them understand the goal value of the business, help them understand both the operational risks and the equity risk in their business, and then help them define and have a clear path to exit. We're the first kind of platform that allows advisors to deliver these succession and exit plans at a time that's really crucial for owners that are thinking about that. So that's the soapbox rant, and I'll be quiet.
Well, it's definitely not a rant. That was very helpful. And I want to go deeper because any advisor that has stuck with us through this interview this far is interested in working with business owners. And this tool is an incredible resource for advisors. And I just want to make sure we go through a couple of what I see from the outside. I have not signed up yet. It's a couple of the resources that they'll have when working with advisors. So we have a business valuation, like I have up on the screen here. And then there's a goal component in here. Is that because of the way you teach advisors to help them map out what they want their valuation goal to be versus where they are today?
Yeah, and look, we think of it's a lot less like pull a number out of the air and what do you want it to be, because we all want it to be more, or we all want it to be gigantic. We think that valuation is super critical, right? So you've got to understand the value of the business today, but we think that goal valuation is far more important, which is to say, great, Jay, your business is worth $10 million, but based on everything you told me, your advisor, your retirement income goals, your legacy goals, your education goal, all these other goals that you have, the business actually needs to be worth, 15 or 20 or 25 million. And so having an understanding of current value versus what the value needs to be is a critical planning step that's often overlooked. I mean, most people think about what's the value today, and if you sold the business, here's what you could accomplish, versus here's what you want to accomplish, and here's how this asset is going to support that. And so we think that the play between the current value and the goal value, which we call wealth, is critically important. And quite frankly, the next question that people often ask is like, man, I bet you see a pretty big gap all the time. And the reality is, some of the favorite businesses that we see that come through, and this happens far more than you'd think, is when the current value is higher than the goal value, meaning they don't need this asset to fund all of their outside goals, hopes, and dreams. And that happens an awful lot. And that gives the owner who's thinking about transitioning the business a tremendous amount of flexibility, right? Because if you don't have to optimize for top dollar, you can optimize for things like legacy or control or community and all these other things, right? Employees that have built the business along with you, right? So there's all sorts of benefits that come with that, and but we think that's the most important thing our platform does, is uncover those two numbers.
Yeah. And Jason, those are the real conversations, the conversations that people really need to be paying advisors for. Also, I got to tell you, when I was prepping for this interview, I thought of a couple of teams that I've worked with over the years that are incredibly successful. Two of them, they are very good at building relationships with small to medium-sized business owners, cultivating it over a long period of time, and then being there for the exit. And then two other advisors, they're in wirehouses. They wait for the deal to happen. And they see the deal hit the wires, and they're sending out the FedEx package and competing with Goldman and all the other teams. This seems to really help the advisor that wants to be in that first group, that wants to build that relationship early, and not at some vanity level of just doing the risk management and trying to grab the 401k plan and wait. Is that a fair statement? And do you have any success stories for us?
Yeah, 100%. I'll start with the former, and I would say you're exactly right, and that is how it has looked for a long, long time. Meaning, there's been a lot of advisors that have surrounded the business owner and have made this a core demographic or target of theirs, and then others have done the wirehouse play where they wait for the exit and then they call. I'll say this: I've operated in the space for a fairly long time. We'll take the wires as an example. Just a couple of years ago, there was maybe one of them that had a business owner, a strategic business owner group in their home office. Today, they all do. And so do the insurance companies, so do the banks, so do the independent broker dealers. So everybody is forming their strategy in and around this client segment. and thinking about ways to educate their advisors, to arm them with tools and technology, because they're realizing that if they wait for the deal to hit the wires, you're definitely too late today. If it wasn't the case before, it very certainly is today. So it's getting more competitive, right? The later it goes, and there's great data available to people, signaling towards these things. So the demographics, not the least of which. So I say all that to say, we're seeing less of that today. Success stories are, like, look, we've got an entire team of people that wake up every day excited about creating better outcomes for advisors who serve business owners and ultimately their business owner clients. And so the success stories are part of what drives us, and we have no shortage of them. I think that, one that comes to mind is, we had a client, and they were working with a founder of a professional services firm, and that professional services firm was selling to a private equity firm. So the private equity firm had approached them. They were going to be an add-on to a platform deal that they were doing. The founder or the owner of this firm was tremendously excited about the offer, and so they brought it. She brought it to their advisor and said, "Hey, look, here's what I'm doing with the business, and here's how it's going to impact my plan, and blah blah blah." And they said, "Awesome. This is kind of how you were thinking about it, and that's all good. Let's run the business through RISR just to get a gut check on, the offer they've made." And so, the offer they made, was called $3 million. I think the RISR valuation had it about 3.8. And ultimately the owner brought the report to the private equity firm and said, "Hey, look, we had this valuation done, and we think we think it ought to be a little bit higher." And ultimately they transacted at $3.5 million. And so just by leveraging the report, this owner was able to drive another $500,000 in the sale of her business. And the advisor looked like a hero, right? Because they drove the extra $500,000. And it was a great outcome for all. Perhaps not, the acquisition price of the private equity firm, but I suspect they'll survive. So again, just a great example of leveraging the technology to create better outcomes, and that drives us every day. It's awesome.
So, Jason, I noticed something else on the tool that I wanted to unpack with you, and that's around risk management. Tell me, what is the function in the tool for this?
Couple things here. The biggest is the equity risk. What the heck does that mean? Well, every owner, like we've talked about for a lot of this show, a lot of their net worth is tied up in the business. So, do they have a buy-sell agreement? Is that buy-sell agreement funded? Most have a buy-sell agreement. Most are not funded. And so if God forbid something happens to them, the equity value in that business, poof, it's gone more times than not. And so if you don't have that protected, you've got tremendous equity risk in your business. But more, not more importantly, but equally as importantly is, as it relates to the value of the business, is the operational risk in the business. So most of these businesses, don't have a McKinsey consultant in there running around telling them how to operate their business. And so there's all sorts of operational risk, be it owner dependency or key person risk or customer concentration or vendors, diversity, all of these things that not only impact the value of their business, but it affects the operational efficiency in their business. And so again, we think that the tool is a great way for the advisor to just hold up the mirror, right? The advisor, again, even if I am Jay Coulter, who works with auto dealers in the tri-state areas, and I know auto dealers damn well, I'm not going to know their business better than them, and that's okay. But ultimately, I can be here to hold up the mirror and say, have you thought about these things? Have you thought about how it's impacting, the health of your business? Have you thought about how it's impacting the value of your business? Because again, most of these businesses, right, the larger they get, the more sophisticated they get. But if you're in the sub $50 million range, most of these businesses are far too dependent on the owner. And owners like that for until they don't, meaning, it's almost a badge of honor. Business doesn't run without me. I've got all the relationships. I'm the guy. But then when someone's holding up the mirror saying that's not great for the transferable value of your business, they start to think about it a little differently. So there's all sorts of risks that you can expose and think about and help an owner to mitigate leverage in the tool.
Sean, you just described 98% of financial advisors. I want to dig into that, but first we have a question from Sean DeFry. How does RISR integrate with the client's financial software stack? Are there native connectors which streamline the integration process, such as API or webhook ecosystems to bring in key data points from cross-functional platforms?
Great question, Sean. We don't have any native integration, so we've got a deep hook into QuickBooks. I mean, for our platform, it is all about data aggregation, but it's business-specific data aggregation. So, we've got the deep integration into QuickBooks, or you can upload the tax returns, and we're going to use our AI software to pull the data out of those tax returns. And so we don't have any other integrations where it's pulling that data from. And then the balance of it is just the qualitative questions. And so there's not a lot of natural integration points. We certainly could and have done so for some larger clients integrated into financial planning software. When we talked about that wealth experience, certainly we're asking things like, how much is needed in retirement income from the sale of this asset. And so as a result, we can pull that data in from financial planning software and pass business value back into the planning software. So I think that's it. But great question.
All right. Thank you, Sean. All right. Before I get to my last question, is there anything about the platform we didn't unpack that advisors should be aware of?
Look, I think readiness is a big thing. So when we talk about succession and exit planning, we think about owners transitioning this asset. Readiness is a really important thing to explore, and so we've developed a readiness score that helps the owner both understand the business readiness to transact and the owner readiness. And I would say the owner readiness is often overlooked and far more important, which is to say, I think it's something to the effect of 23% of businesses that go to market to transact actually transact. And why is that? Well, certainly it's because in diligence, deals fall apart. Owners find things they don't, acquirers find things they don't like, mismatch of culture and values, or, all sorts of reasons. But a big reason is owner readiness, meaning as they get further down the deal process and as they get into it, they start to think, who am I without this business? What am I going to do when I wake up tomorrow? And they realize that the owner wasn't ready to exit. And so I say all that to say, exit readiness is a critical thing. And so we score that based on both the business and the owner's readiness. And that's something that advisors can really engage with the owner around, which is to say, like, have you thought about your plan? Have you communicated your plan to the people that matter most to you? Have you thought about what you're going to do after the exit? And so I think just aligning all the stakeholders around that is critically important. And it's a great weapon for advisors to engage with owners on, because they can go through a process where, look, the reality is the best businesses operate as if they're already always ready to exit, but most don't. And so if you got a knock on your door as an owner and said, hey, I'll give you $20 million or $50 million or $100 million, whatever the number is, number one, do you know if that's a good number for your business? And two, if they went into diligence, like how does your business look? So again, the best owners operate as if they're already always willing and ready to go, but it's the owner readiness that's a critical step there. So we think a lot about readiness, and that gets a score on our platform, and you can improve that over time by checking things off.
Jason, that's a great dovetail into my last question. Now, Brad Johnson had asked you the same question. It goes without saying, a financial advisor signs up for this tool, they're going to put their own business through these, through the system. I would think that most of them aren't ready, because I've learned from my consulting business over the past 10 years that most advisors aren't even close to ready to sell their business. What have advisors found when they put their own practice through your system?
Yeah, look, for the advisors listening, you're in a great business, right? So you have great businesses. I think that what they'll often find, is that what really hurts the transferable value of an advisor's practice, so if you have scaled and you have, if you have multiple advisors and a large team and you've got operations and the business doesn't depend on you, you're going to have other issues that we can talk about. But if we're still talking about it kind of the practice level and your business depends on you as the advisor, um, you know, that can be a challenge, not one that's um, too detrimental, right? Because it's still a super valuable business. But there's another thing that you have to critically understand, which is who are the makeup of your clients, right? So whether it's customer concentration or are your customers growing, right? Are they in the accumulation phase or the decumulation phase, right? Because if you strip away market growth of your practice, in this space specifically, um, the increased multiples that people are willing to pay for growers versus non-growers is astounding. And so if your practice is growing, hats off to you. Most aren't, believe it or not, sans market growth. And so I think kind of a combination of those couple things, right? How dependent is it on you as the owner? What's your client mix and client makeup look like? And are you growing or are you not growing? And I think that most would, if I had a room full of 100 advisors, Jay, and I said, who's growing their practice, all 100 would raise their hand. But we know that that's not the case. And so, I think taking a deep, honest look at your growth is an important exercise.
Yeah. I mean, Jason, the industry data is clear. I mean, the things that are going to drive valuations for a financial advisor are organic growth, number one. Number two, do you have tax planning services? And then number three, have you accounted for the Gen 2 advisor? So for advisors out there that are looking to increase their valuations, I'd pay attention to those, the data, and that's really, really clear. Jason, this is a really cool tool. Where can advisors go and learn more about the platform?
God bless you. You had it up on during the call. Just our website's a great place to go. So RISR.com, RISR.com. And we'd love a chance to hear from you and work with you.
Excellent. Jason, thank you so much for coming on.
Really enjoyed it, Jay. Thanks for having me.
The listener of this content should not assume that any information presented or made available on or through this media channel is receipt of or substitute for personalized investment advice. Titleist Asset Management, LLC, or TAM, is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Registration with the SEC does not imply a certain level of skill or expertise. TAM provides its services to individuals, high net worth investors, including trusts and other legal entities, and provides access to model portfolio strategies offered through its affiliate, Shorebird Capital LP. For a copy of TAM's disclosure documents, please visit www.advisorinfo.sec.gov and follow the search instructions.